Good morning, Indakana. My name is Rhonda Bisa. I'm from Whitefield, New Hampshire. You are listening to Moccasin Tracks.
Something in the water, something in the air. Something on the TV that really isn't there. Here comes a hurricane, category 5. Brand new virus eating us alive. Don't talk about a meltdown, I don't want to hear. Just add it to the things I gotta fear. Dancing in a graveyard in broken high heels. Spinning round in circles like a Ferris wheel. Fools and politicians don't believe it's real. Dancing in a graveyard in broken high heels.
This is Moccasin Tracks. My name is Deb Rigger, and I'm here with
Terry LaHunt.
and
Rick Hunt.
And
Hello, welcome.
and I want to welcome Deb Katz, Chris Williams. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's really a privilege to have you here and actually see you in person to
Yes.
have our conversation.
Thank
Yay.
you for having us. It's really great. I've been seeing on Facebook what has come up again and again, and I really felt it was time to communicate about nuclear all over again.
Absolutely. And, you know, because we're broadcasting in New Hampshire, we went to the clamshellalliance.com website and just read a little bit of the history. It's really important. And to know that our friends are here in the state. And, you know, we want to churn you up. We want to, bring you out with us and talk about these issues that so often are not talked about. Deb Katz, tell us a little bit about what we should be concerned about, both at Seabrook, Vermont Yankee, and all the other New England sites that really I want to call nuclear waste sites these days.
Well, they are nuclear waste sites. In a sense, that's really important because the industry at this point is really trying to greenwash itself to create a kind of nuclear renaissance about how clean it is. And in fact, there's a bill in the Massachusetts legislature to deem nuclear power, which is really an abomination. So what you have at this point in terms of New England is that citizens have shuttered 6 out of the 9 reactors in New England. And so there are 2 operating, one is Seabrook, and there are 2 in Connecticut, which is the Millstone reactors, 2 on one site. The rest are in various stages of decommissioning. So in one sense, we've had a lot of success. In another sense, the reality is people have sort of gone back to sleep about a lot of it because it isn't front and center in people's brains. And unless you live in a reactor community or in the shadow of a nuke, it's not on the top of your list to think about. But in fact, there are a lot of issues so that with decommissioning and the reactor shuttered, there is no doubt that it's safer. But that doesn't mean it's safe. And there are many problems involved in this. That one is the issue that at all of these sites, so there are 9 sites in New England at this point. They're the oldest nukes in the country, in fact. All of these sites basically are high-level nuclear waste dumps. That's what they are. And there is waste at all of these sites. Some of it is in fuel pools. Some of it is in these giant dry cast storage containers. But all of it is really dangerous and toxic and potentially hazardous for 1,000,000 years.
Mhm.
I want people to just think about what it's like to try to describe to someone even 200 years from now that they shouldn't touch one of those casks.
Right.
It's mind-boggling, this problem.
Mhm.
And to add to it is that the nuclear industry, which promised all these reactor communities that when the reactors shuttered, the waste would be gone. And in fact, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the nuclear industry have abdicated their responsibility to deal with this waste. It is now close to 70 years, and none of this waste has moved in any reasonable way.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this waste is basically been abandoned, and these reactor sites are vulnerable, and they're vulnerable to a couple of issues. One is in terms of climate disruption
Mhm.
and the fact that all of these sites are potentially vulnerable to flooding and can be compromised. I'll go into that in a minute. But the other is terrorism. I mean, after 9/11, there was an acknowledgement that the dry gas storage as well as the fuel pools were vulnerable to acts of terror. And even though all of that was sort of poo-pooed by the industry and the NRC, the reality is that that is in fact the case. So that these sites are, as the National Governors Association said back in 2002 or 3, the fuel at reactor sites is basically pre-deployed weapons of mass destruction. That's the National Governors Association. That's not CAN. We're not the ones saying that. And yet, what has the industry or the NRC done to, in fact, protect these sites, protect these reactor communities that are stuck with this waste? All they've attempted to do is basically target working poor Hispanic communities in the Southwest to basically move the waste to parking lot dumps to sit out in the open just to attempt to create the illusion that they can make the waste disappear, just to make it seem like it's not a problem. But this is called environmental racism.
Yes.
And this is a practice that the industry is engaged in from its start. The reason Roe, and I live in Roe, was the first commercial reactor in America is because there are about 300 people in my town. And it was almost the furthest point away from Boston that you could get to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, to give you a sense of climate disruption and some of the issues, and then I'll turn it over to Chris to talk about in terms of issues, is that at Roe, right, we shut that reactor. It's the smallest commercial reactor in America. It started in 61 and we shuttered it in 91. And it basically has sat there. They cleaned the site up, but the waste is still there 30 years later, close to 30 years. The waste can't go anywhere. But right above Roe are two dams. One is a Deerfield Dam. The Deerfield River runs right along there. It runs through Vermont, you know, the Deerfield River. But right above, across the border, is the Harriman Reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
And you may know the Harriman Reservoir. So that is over 2,000 acres. It's a massive reservoir. It actually was the first to develop this process to basically create a kind of whirligig to get overflow water out when there was flooding. The reality is that the USGS has acknowledged if the dam at Harriman broke, there would be a 10-foot wall of water that would get down to Shelburne Falls, which is about 25 miles away, in about 30 minutes. And what it has the potential to do is take the casks that are at Roe that are right below the dam.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is Roe then classified as a vulnerable site for flooding and for the danger of what could happen? The GIO, which oversees the General Accounting Office, oversees NRC and other agencies, has said there's no danger at Roe. And yet Roe is probably one of the most dangerous sites in terms of what can happen.
Mm-hmm.
There is also all of these issues around maximum precipitation events. You could think of all the dams on the Connecticut River, all of those dams before you get to Vermont Yankee, and what could happen if those canisters which are again sitting right next to the river,
Right on the river.
whether they're compromised by acts of malice or they're compromised by maximum precipitation events. The National Academy of Science did a study about what are maximum precipitation events in terms of flooding for infrastructure, including nukes. And what they came up with was the fact they were 30 years behind, and they had no full understanding of what maximum precipitation events could look like and the effect they would have. So we're in a realm where the NRC and the industry are saying, just dance around your refrigerators. Let us just set up more nukes with AI and all sorts of stuff, and let's bring them all back at a moment where they don't know their ass from their elbow. So, Chris, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some of this.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Synopsis of what we're looking at here in New England. Really, thank you.
Well, thanks, Deb. You certainly covered a lot of territory.
I did.
I will tell you that we have been monitoring the decommissioning of Vermont Yankee, and I'm sorry, they're about to demolish the containment building. They believe they're going to do that in January, and they assure us everything will be okay. And to be honest, the contractor, North Star, has done a better job at Vermont Yankee than what we're hearing from our colleagues in other cities that are dealing with a company named Holtec, which has created nightmares all over the place. Locally at Pilgrim, they're wanting to dump a massive amount of radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay, and that's created quite a stir. The same company is attempting a decommissioning at Indian Point, about 25 miles north of New York City. And their plan there, again, is to dump radioactive water into the Hudson River so it can flow by Gotham City. But the bottom line is that we're just seeing more of what we've always seen from the nuclear industry, which is they try to sell us all kinds of things and give us very positive stories about what it is they're doing. And at the same time, we're sitting on nightmares all over the country. So at Vermont Yankee, they're going to, in January, demolish the containment building. They're getting close to, relatively close to completion there. I asked at a meeting recently if they were going to inform the elementary school across the street that maybe they should send the kids home or far away for the demolition. And I didn't get an answer. But anyway, that's just more of how they operate. But more significantly, and this is referencing back to what Deb was talking about, the issue of climate resilience all around New England, and in fact all around the country, is very significant. If I think back to the last two summers here in Vermont, Not where I am. I'm in a small town called Hancock, and we've only lost a couple of bridges on a main state highway. But if you look at what happened, for instance, in Montpelier,
Mm-hmm.
where virtually every storefront in the city of Montpelier was flooded out,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you have to start asking questions. If for 2 summers in a row we've had significant flooding here in Vermont, are we taking that into account when we look at the 58 giant casks of high-level waste sitting 30 yards from the Connecticut River?
Mm-hmm.
Or for that matter, as Deb mentioned, the Harriman Reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
The Harriman Reservoir is the largest freshwater body completely contained within the state of Vermont. So in other words, it's our largest lake. Everybody would go, oh, but what about Lake Champlain? Well, certainly Lake Champlain's bigger, but we share it with Quebec and New York. But the largest body of water in the state of Vermont is there because of a dam. And if that dam goes downriver where Deb lives, we're going to have a big problem. I've been in touch with an office called the Climate Action Office, which is part of the Agency of Natural Resources. And it's their job to be assessing potential problems regarding climate change and climate resilience. And they gladly accepted my questions with regard to both of those nuclear waste sites. And I'd given them a little time over the summer, but I haven't heard back from them, and it's time for me to reach out again and continue bothering them until we get some firm answers about what they're going to suggest be done to secure those locations and to assure the population that they're aware of it and on top of it. And all of this is happening at a time when I was in my car today coming back from a doctor's appointment, listening to NPR, and there was a woman named Catherine Huff who used to be with the Department of Energy, and she was like the Secretary for Nuclear Energy, going on and on with all the typical stuff that they talk about. Oh, the waste isn't a problem. We're going to take care of it. Oh, the waste, we can recycle it. They like to use the term recycling.
Mm-hmm.
And what, of course, they're talking about is the process known as reprocessing, which was brought to us by the Manhattan Project long ago. And when they tried to turn it over to a private company to work its magic and take what could be used as potential fuel out of spent fuel, they did that in West Valley, New York. They let a private company do that. And to this day, they had to close it after about 6 years. To this day, it's a huge radioactive Superfund site in the state of New York that's owned by the citizens of New York. And in no way can they predict when that site will be clean. Mm-hmm. So as we sit here today, we're going to have to confront again the myths of the nuclear industry that they're laying out. It's clean, it's cheap, and we're going to take care of everything for you. I think this country is going to have to take a deep breath and assess what this sudden flood of data centers and the offers from the nuclear industry to take care of everything, what that means and how we fight back. Fortunately, this isn't just one magic wand waved in DC that makes it happen. There are a lot of mechanisms with regard to citing these things and powering them, and importantly, paying for them, that citizens have a lot of opportunity for input and hopefully protest and ultimately victory. So there, I'll leave it there for now.
Excellent. Chris, if I could just ask you to elaborate a little bit more in January when they start to take apart. What are the plans? Are they going to be shipping that out by train, by truck?
Yes.
And then I want to ask you to maybe just kind of give us a brief, what should we be aware of on the roads, on the train tracks? How do we alert citizens, or, is this something that the state of Vermont is going to, information that they're going to give the citizens? Or is
Well,
this something that we're going to have to like demand?
here's the process. Most of the radioactivity from Vermont Yankee, aside from the spent fuel, which is most of the radioactivity, but everything else that was um, radioactive, either mildly radioactive or pretty contaminated, is being shipped to a site in Andrews County, Texas, which is on the Texas-New Mexico border, Andrews County. And it's going there as a result of a long-standing compact that was reached between the state of Vermont and the state of Texas. There is a group that meets routinely to supervise this, what's known as this compact. But it's run by a company called Waste Control Specialists, and it's a low-level waste dump. Originally, it was going to be exclusively for the use of Texas and Vermont. And in addition to nuclear power waste, it would also accept various forms of medical waste and so forth. After a while, the people running the Waste Control Specialist dump in Andrews County decided they weren't making enough money from just Texas and Vermont. And amongst themselves, the compact members voted to basically throw the gates open and allow potential customers with radioactive waste from all over the country to begin dumping there. But to go back to your original question, since they started decommissioning Vermont Yankee, and even before it was decommissioned, when it was operating, there have been shipments to, among other places, but for the most part, waste control specialists. They go by truck, and they also go by rail. And it happens routinely, and it happens all the time. And the what's known as the NDCAP, the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel here in Vermont, meets. They're meeting less frequently, but when they meet, the companies and the state report how many shipments and when those shipments happened, and sometimes they even tell us what was in the shipments. But just so you know, these shipments are routine and regular.
I want to ask you.
I just want to say one thing in terms of this, to put this in a whole context, because Ken is actually doing a campaign around the issue of where the waste from all the New England reactors, where that waste went. Because the reality is nuclear is able to claim that it's clean only because it's invisible and you can't see it. And if they were forced to die, the emissions that they have from the reactor that go in the air or go in the water, then people would suddenly be shocked if their water was pink every day and their air was pink. But because of that, the industry basically gets away with murder. But one of the things that's really important in this is what to continue to operate. These nukes basically contaminate America to keep nuclear power going. So before Waste Control Specialists had this site in Texas, there was Barnwell, South Carolina, a 46% African American community, working poor, which was basically, as the state of South Carolina put it, the pay toilet for the nuclear industry. And so all of the waste
Hmm.
from these reactors, and this, they call it low-level waste, but that does not mean that it isn't dangerous
Yeah.
and that you can't get hurt by it. All the
Mhm.
waste from reactors was going to Barnwell, South Carolina, until South Carolina said, we've had enough. This has got to stop, especially when the decommissioning of New England reactors started, and there was a massive amount of waste going down there. But this is environmental racism. And there are other communities that have suffered the burden of cleaning these nukes up, whether it's in Utah, Richland. Where is Richland, Chris?
Washington.
Washington.
Oh, yeah.
They have contaminated America so that they can claim that they're clean. And this is an abomination. And it is, and the communities that are targeted are people of color, working poor, farming communities, Native American, indigenous, and this is reprehensible. And what happens is people and communities are forced to choose between short-term economic gain and long-term health and safety. And this is immoral. And it is the bedrock of how the industry does business.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that into kind of context in this to understand, and it is going on routinely and regularly, and we are actually developing maps to be able to show people, because in a certain way, there's a whole generation now that has no understanding of how reactors operate or what goes on, or everything is focused on the accident, right? And how many people died. And the reality is, it's about standard operation. It's about the routine polluting of our communities with radioactive waste, and also with heating our waterways to cool the reactors so much that the aquatic life in our rivers and waterways is compromised and destroyed by them. And these are the best kept secrets because it's invisible and people don't know that it's going on. And then what they don't dump in our communities, they go and dump somewhere else.
Yeah.
And there is really no accountability for any of this. What the industry relies on, there are two things, and then I'll give it back to Chris. They rely on our ignorance to be able to get away with murder. And I remember I was in Connecticut. We were suing the NRC over the cleanup of Connecticut Yankee, one of the reactors that we had worked hard to shutter. And it was right after 9/11. And so we're there. The EPA, the state of Connecticut, was also suing Connecticut Yankee over the cleanup. And I turned to the lawyer from Connecticut Yankee, and I said, well, given 9/11, what are you going to do with the high level waste? Because that waste is a target for terrorism, as you know. How are you going to protect it? And he looked at me and he said, when you have a problem and you don't have a solution, then you don't have a problem.
Whoa. Oh, my.
And that is the position the industry and the federal government has taken in terms of the vulnerability of nuclear reactors and nuclear sites to terrorism. And it is the same position that they are taking in terms of climate disruption.
Yeah.
And it is just immoral. And it is dangerous because our communities are vulnerable to their basically contempt for what could happen to all of us. So, Chris, I turn it back to you, but
It's okay. One other aspect, and this just adds more injury and insult. One other aspect of this whole thing that is overlooked a lot. Deb and I and our colleagues around the country, and in fact around the world, that have been fighting civilian nuclear power. We don't spend a lot of time, even though we know about it, discussing the connection to the military weapons complex.
Mhm.
I mean, that's where the idea to use fission to boil water and make electricity came from.
Mhm.
They needed a nice cover story for the weapons complex. I know people that have spent their lives, cataloging and accounting for the military side of things and the waste and contamination and community destruction that comes with it. And yes, our civilian nuclear power program produces a lot of problems, but it is on top of a massive, what was once, and still probably is, largely top secret set of operations. There are military radioactive sites from coast to coast in this country that would literally cost trillions of dollars just to begin the process of containing what we've created.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't go a day fighting the civilian nukes without thinking about all those other communities, all those other sites that are compromised and not talked about enough.
Yeah.
That are connected to the military process
Yep.
and all this.
Yeah.
So as we go forward now, I'm just trying to, process what I'm hearing every day about whoopee. We're going to build all these data centers, and we're going to just cleanly power them with nuclear power. They're going to scatter these small modular reactors all over the landscape. It's truly insane. And the numbers for increased demand for electricity that they're talking about are unheard of in the last 30 years. We've not seen any numbers even come close to what they're projecting. And so it's time for a lot of people to get back up.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you,
become
Chris.
part of this process.
Yeah, yeah. I want to go back.
It's also, sorry, go ahead.
If I could ask a question about, we might have to have you back again because this is a big issue. But years ago, I did attend some of those meetings with the group of government officials and state representatives to figure out the compact with the state of Texas.
Right.
I want to go back to that because a lot of those people are still involved. A lot of those people are representing the people of Vermont. And I have always felt that that decision was wrong from the very get-go, that we would, not in our backyard, but okay, down in your backyard, like that is not right. And it was Bernie Sanders' wife, and it is Mark McDonald, who is a representative in my home district. So I want to call them out because I think that these people should be accountable for that decision. And now we're going to allow the trucks and we're going to allow the trains to take this waste that was generated in our state because we thought we needed that electricity. So I want to say that and be very clear.
Sure.
About it because the accountability, Deb, you mentioned it, the responsibility that we all have for future generations, it is front and center right now. And we need to speak to this and not be dancing around our refrigerators, although I do like to dance with my refrigerator, and we got to dance through this, but people need to be accountable, especially if they're representing the state and they're involved in state government.
Agree.
Look, the issue of what nuclear has gotten away with is just remarkable in this. And what you're seeing with all this, the issue of AI just adds insult to injury at this point. So to try to bring dead nukes back,
I know.
to make private corporations have more money and basically use massive, not just amounts of electricity, which then doesn't get to the grid, so ratepayers don't get it. It just goes to these AI centers. They use massive amounts of water to cool the machinery. So
Yeah.
in Central America, where they've set up some of these data centers, the farmers haven't had enough water for their crop because the water is going to cool the machinery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's beyond
And
the nuclear cooling.
and that's beyond the nuclear, just like they're now saying that, and maybe this will allow allies, to take this issue up as well, is they're going to keep coal plants going, or they're bringing coal plants back to power AI centers. I mean, this is sheer madness, just so you can have instant gratification. It just will devastate the planet. And there is a lack of a debate, an open, honest look at AI, at nuclear, at the price. Is it worth it? And they're just pushing ahead to do this. And it will just contaminate the earth and undermine the viability of this planet to survive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to talk about raising our consciousness and any ideas on that and how we can move forward, because one of the things about doing community radio is that we have a voice. We have a mic here, and we can amplify your voices and your thoughts. And one of the goals that I always keep in the back of my mind is that to raise people's consciousness, and until we have that relationship with the earth,
Look,
we
that's why everyone calls us Citizens Action Network, but our name is Citizens Awareness Network, because we believe awareness transforms everything. That once you understand things, once you have a sense of the cost of things really change. It's not just some abstract idea in some place where you don't have to think about. It becomes visceral and real. I mean, one of the campaigns we're working on, which ties into all of this, is around climate disruption and the vulnerability. I mean, in one sense, it's focused on Massachusetts, but part of it is to bring in Vermont and New Hampshire, which is about, Massachusetts is surrounded or has within it this little state 4 reactors, either in the borders or right outside. And then you have the Millstone reactors, which are not that far away, right? There's Seabrook, there's Vermont Yankee, there's Yankee Row, there's Pilgrim. And so
Maine Yankee.
Maine Yankee.
It's a little up there.
It's up there. So, I mean, what we're looking at,
I want to give
the
you
concentration.
Each, we only have a couple minutes left, Deb, so each to give Chris a minute and you a minute, and I promise to have you back. I'll send you some dates and we'll come back to this. It's important.
Tell them about what we're doing with what we want, Chris.
Well, we want to, as I was saying earlier about the Climate Action Office in Vermont, we want to make the bureaucrats, feel some heat, that it's time to get off their butts and actually recognize the problem that they have with these decommissioned or decommissioning sites, and to reassure the public that they're on top of it with regard to potential climate-related problems. I also think it's time, as people digest more of what's going on with these proposals for new nuclear plants, that we get about educating younger people as to what this is all about and their need to do what we did 40 years ago and get up and fight these things. So, excellent. And I'm happy to come back whenever you want.
Oh, okay, great. Deb, do you have any closing comment?
Just that what we want is for the state of Massachusetts with Vermont and New Hampshire to actually do a study of the vulnerability of these reactors the climate disruption and how it will impact our states and our citizens and even the breadbasket in terms of our food production if all of this area gets contaminated. We want the state to do the work. So that's part of the campaign. People can go to our site, nukebusters.org, get more information.
Yes, absolutely.
And next time, I would like us to also, if you could, bring our colleague Diane Turco from Pilgrim
cool.
Hall.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
That would be great.
Thank you guys, and thank you for all you do.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll be back again.
Thank you.